Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 112, Tech and Stuff.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram, and I'm here with
Michael Miller. It throws me off when you say, and I'm here with.
Because I don't always do it either.
You don't. You throw me off. Like, if you just end with Jeffrey W. Ingram, I will always add, and I'm Michael Miller, because that's what feels comfortable to me.
I know.
You cut me deep.
Well, after your lame title there for the show.
You know, I wanted to call it the third triumphantist return of Milwaukee Michael, but you insisted on tech and stuff. I didn't create that title, so I won't take credit for it.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
We're talking about tech level.
Tech level. So the idea is we're really talking about tech level, and we did an episode earlier, or episode 5, I believe, where I talked about sort of tech levels in general, types of tech levels. That's not what we'll be going into here. But to give you an idea,
we're not going to talk about types of.
We can a little bit, but I mean, I've covered sort of, and
you don't want to retread the same ground.
Retread that, but I want to talk a little bit about the idea of it. And the idea of the tech levels it's a way to track the technological ability of the world that you're on, or you can be more specific if you want to or not. And essentially, I track it from what I call the Stone Age to the extra dimensional age, which is essentially, I mean, I think that'd be kind of a boring book because they can pretty much pass through here. You can do anything they want to. It's hard to have a convincing protagonist when, everyone in the universe can act at the level of almost like a supreme god.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So how did you go about choosing your tech level for your book? Because your world has a vast history that you could choose from, like a low tech level, i.e. Stone Age or Iron Age, or even advanced Space Age.
Yeah. And usually where a lot of that came from the way my world started developing was as a world for role-playing games. So I started building up material for eras I liked. So I have some material for the Space Age. A lot of the games you played in were more around what I would call the late Middle Ages, where they're not quite up to the Renaissance yet, but they're starting to approach it. You have a little bit more formed, stable countries. They're not really nation states yet, but they're going to approach that in a couple hundred years.
I don't know if you quite caught the question, though.
Mm-hmm. And how did I pick mine? And I'm getting to that.
Okay. But how did you pick yours for the book?
The book. That's right. So I was just reinforcing this idea that there's a vast amount of weird stuff all over the tech timeline.
What's the name?
And a Western one as well too, which I never got to run.
You have a Western campaign?
A Western style campaign. It's actually in the South, but yes, it's the sort of a setting that resembles sort of the Old West, where there's no centralized authorities that are close, but there's this looming fear of them coming. And it was actually, we came up with it. My wife actually really wanted to play because we were watching Deadwood. And so she has a fascination with Swearinger. You'd be shocked to learn.
Of what?
Swearinger from Deadwood.
I've never watched the show.
Oh, okay. You would enjoy it if you can handle the cussing.
I can handle the cussing.
I know you can handle the cussing. I'm throwing that as a warning for other people. It's a great show.
What's it? Showtime?
HBO.
HBO.
The only thing I'll warn you and everyone listening on, the writer decided to stop making it. He had the ability to go several seasons with it because it was super popular. And he decided to try another show called like Johnny Cincinnati or something like that, which was a weird avant-garde detective show, I believe, which failed after its first year. And
so the show continued without the guy who started it, or the show just ended?
The show ended because it was his writing that made the show. And so when he decided that he was essentially the creator / writer, when he said, no, we're not doing this anymore, they offered him a bunch of money and he still said no. And I
hate it when people do that.
Yeah. And so the story is left at a very bad spot.
Okay.
However, there is news of an upcoming movie.
How many seasons did they make? Two?
Two, I believe.
Okay.
So it's good and bad. It's not as bad as watching Firefly, where it's just starting to get really good and they steal it from you. But
Sarah is at. I think we have 3 more episodes,
and this is her first.
And this is her first time watching. It's taken me 7 years, about almost 7 years, 6.5 years to get Sarah to finally get into Firefly. I've tried to expose it to her like 2, maybe 3 times before, where I've gotten her to watch an episode.
We try to expose it to her. Does she just slap you?
And she just wasn't into it. Okay. She watched a little and she's like, this isn't doing it for me. But she's finally hooked. Yeah. Like she's in it now. She likes the characters and so.
Yeah, because
she's still not into it as much as I'm into it, but at least she likes watching it.
Yeah,
so
which is important.
It's a big jump.
And then she can learn to hate Murdoch, who can never be forgiven for that one sin.
What? Murdoch?
Richard Murdoch.
Oh, for canceling the show.
So
all this was a segue from you talking about a western part of your world.
Yep. So
southern.
Outside of that, so the reason I picked this era was the first thing that really made me think about adding more detail to my world was years ago. I was putting together a tripod site, and I
don't know what that is.
It's an old crappy HTML thing where you could build your own websites. And so, I had my timeline up there, and I was putting race information and stuff up there. This was back, I think, when I was in college. I mean, early internet days. And someone actually commented on one of them, which shocked me. How an actual person really found this. Mm-hmm. And they were like, they saw this gigantic timeline, which I have a very extensive timeline for my world. And, they're like, oh, this character here, William, sounds really interesting. Do you have any stories about him? And I did. It was just a name I had just picked and thrown up there as this figure that was important for a few lines in the timeline. And that's really all I had for him. And it made me start thinking. And so the actual novel is actually beginning William's journey. So this is it's a story that's kind of built up over the years of my mind.
So William's the main character.
So William's the main character of the first novel, and it's sort of his story, and which is kind of the interesting thing with it. It was an afterthought. It was something I just chucked up there, to have my D&D looking timeline for my world, and that was one of the things that really made me start thinking more about filling in more details I had never filled in before.
So you owe the novel to this person who queried you on this your one comment tripod.
On a lousy tripod site, which, oh my God, I don't know if they're even still out there. I couldn't even access it anymore, I don't think. But it was a lousy iteration of my world. It was where I was starting to come into my own as a world builder, but before I had really started putting my brain on correct.
What's the name of the novel?
It is called The Steward's Son.
The Steward's Son.
It will be due out this year. The exact date will be given hopefully soon.
So you still haven't answered the question, how did you choose the tech level for the novel?
Because of when he lived.
That was it. Just the fact that, and that was the time period.
So I wanted to tell his
you'd
story.
Already chosen the time period that character landed in, and because somebody queried you about the character, you decided, I'll build this era.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And it's in a part of the world where it's been heavily developed over the years and sort of redeveloped and redeveloped several times.
Can you tell us the tech level of the novel?
It is sort of early Middle Ages.
Early Middle Ages.
No, I'm sorry. It's not early Middle Ages. It is Iron Age.
Iron Age.
Yep. And would be the generic tech level of the area.
Plus space guns, right? Lots of space guns.
So isn't that Iron Age?
Well, I mean, in my book.
Yeah.
Iron Age and space guns. They just.
I think it's a redundant thing to say, but yeah,
they fire space. You just shoot it; it creates existence. Space creates. Space.
Well, you need the black hole generators to power.
Of course,
yeah, but
sometimes you walk into a room and you realize it's a little cramped because there's too much furniture. Yeah. So you pull out your space gun and it just creates more space in the room. So
and people didn't know a bag of holding from D&D was actually a black hole that you could place items into and retrieve them from. That's why you could put so much stuff in there.
Works for me.
Yeah, I read that.
Makes as much sense as everything else.
I'll put that up on the internet somewhere so it'll become real.
All right. Well, getting back to tech level, you chose because somebody queried about a character, but I find for me, if I'm going to choose a tech level for a story, that it's really just what kind of story do I want to tell. I find tech level ends up being a big deciding factor of what I'm going to go with. Like, do I want to tell something that's more, steampunky? Do I want to talk about something that's more D&D or more noir or whatever? Yeah. I'll choose more genre, and genre will kind of decide tech level.
And that's a perfectly honest way to do it. I mean, and most of the areas I actually have real stuff built up for in my world were areas I wanted to storytell it. So that's part of it too. If I don't want to tell that story, or if I don't want to use that era, like on Earth, the Victorian era, the Edwardian era, I find exceptionally boring. I don't give a lick about them. One of the reasons I don't like steampunk is it's typically set in this neo Victorian era, and I just, the era bores me to death.
See, I find that era, I'm not interested in that era.
But if you add steampunk,
but I do like the steampunk version of that era because it adds. I mean, obviously, there's so much technology in
it. Makes it interesting.
Yeah, there's so much technology in most steampunk stories or steampunk games that it's stuff that's not. You can't make this stuff work. Like you can't.
Oh yeah.
You can't make a steampunk robot.
What was the old Spelljammer?
Spelljammer. Yeah.
That's another one. That was fascinating. I actually played a little bit there. I had weird little ships built up to make armadas because that's
the one where you had the ships that went across space, but it was still kind of like
they were actual like ships.
Yeah,
but like you'd have devices. I believe Magic users had to control them. I don't remember it specifically, but I played there a little bit.
I vaguely remember playing maybe one session.
Yeah, I think I played a little bit in there.
My buddy liked it.
Yeah.
So I have our whole show written out here, but I feel like it's definitely a scattered idea. Why don't you choose? What do you want to go to next?
Let's hop down to Magic versus Technology.
I was just going to say I need a pointer, but I realized I had one.
If my cat starts attacking the board, we'll lose the words.
So you want to go to Magic and Technology?
Yeah,
because I was also thinking this might make sense.
Yeah, but I think with talking about steampunk, it would make sense to start talking now about Magic versus Technology, which appears to be a classical question people come up with. And Mike and I don't think agree with the question. We agree that
don't agree with the question with each other, or the way other people pose it.
That should be the question you ask yourself. There doesn't need to be a Magic versus Technology. You definitely can do it. I would call it a bit trope at this point, but unlike most people, I don't think tropes are bad. It is how you apply the trope and how interesting you make the story that is what matters. But usually the idea of Magic versus Technology is this idea that, well, as technology grows in power, Magic weakens.
Yeah. And for anyone who thinks that, I have one thing to say about that: Shadowrun.
Yeah.
If you don't think Magic and Technology can merge for great storytelling, look up Shadowrun.
One of the interviews I did, J.S. Marone, and I was asking about it. I'm like, so how do you do Magic and Technology? And I was like, as the technology goes up, the Magic enhances it. He's like, no, the Magic is the technology. So like he has like a space, a ship-bound universe, but it's like a Magic person running the ship, not an engineer. So it's sort of like this idea where it's not. I don't think it's quite like Spelljammer, where it's like wooden ships in space. But it's like it's all about magic. It's not about technology at all. So it's complete fantasy. It's not something like Star Wars where you can kind of argue both ways because there's technology and magic in there.
Star Wars is another great example.
Star Wars is another great example.
But I would say that while there is magic in Star Wars, that I would say that it's small. Like, there's very few people that can use it. You don't see it very often.
There's a limited quantity of people who can use it, but it's very big because don't screw with Vader.
Yeah.
Oh, you think your starter story is going to help you? I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, you got to watch, you got to play what is it? The Force Unleashed. And, of course, Knights of the Old Republic. Both of those stories have really serious examples of force use and force manipulation that you don't get from the movies. Now, with the advent of the new movie has some more significant force power, but even still insignificant compared to what's displayed in those two stories.
Yeah, it's like it's a little bit more introverted in the original movies. Especially in the original trilogy, you get how tough the Emperor is, but you don't see it much. I mean, you see a little bit like the laser stuff. That's a neat little trick. But the ability just to like literally mind control people, that is a pretty powerful thing, but it's more subtle, where you start getting the more modern stuff and with the ability to display it, they can show off some more of what the Force is capable of. So,
but even still, what they show, there's still so few people that can use it. You got to figure that there's tons and tons and tons and tons of people throughout that galaxy that would go an entire lifetime without ever meeting someone capable of doing such a thing.
But that's if you're buying the fact that it is the reality of what you see in there is the true reality, and not some conspiracy between the Sith and the Jedi to repress the Force abilities in other people so they can maintain the control upon themselves.
Is that a storyline?
It's a conspiracy theory I just thought of.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was going to say, is that something that ever came up as in one of the stories? I would buy it, but
I mean, it's a legitimate argument to make. I think most people who are fans are saying, "No, Force Jedi good." Maybe Sith would do that, but not the Jedi. I'm a bit less absolute in good and evil. So.
I read a great article not too long ago that was advocating the understanding that actually dark side is good and light side is bad, and the argument was very compelling.
Yeah, there's interesting stuff all the time, but let's be honest, you write that article because it's clickbait, and if I saw it, I would have so clicked through it.
But my point, while it is clickbait, it was still it was a very well and supported argument.
Much like tropes, let me point out right now, I don't mind clickbait if when I click through, I get good content. What I dislike is when I click through and I get
junk,
a stupid gallery thing that you have to hit 45 slides to get all of the content, or it's not very good.
Or you get 2 paragraphs that somebody clearly sat down and fired off while drinking a coffee. Like there's no real research or thought behind it or any evidence to support.
Don't waste your good headlines on those.
Yeah.
You need them to build the SEO of your site maybe, but you don't waste the good headlines on those.
So basically, technology versus magic, Jeff and I kind of subscribe to. Technology does not have to be versus magic. Yeah. It's really, if you want it to be great, if you don't, great. Be a good story writer. Like if you're going to pick one of them, support it. Like give us reasoning, give us a logical... Yeah. Or it doesn't actually, to be fair, it doesn't even necessarily have to be logical.
No, it has to be a consistent.
It has to be
itself.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and just as an example, the way I do magic in Gardual is I treat it almost like an industry, like a technology. So it's like, obviously it doesn't really matter which age that they're in my world because there's no magic versus.
Does magic die out in your world at any point? No. So magic, even out into the space age, magic is still out there?
Yes. And the difference is, magic in my system is about rituals. Rituals change.
So more like shamanistic?
Oh, no.
No.
You have shamanistic in my world is more of your primitive magic. Mm-hmm. It develops more into your spell, like learned kind of magic where we can now manipulate.
Oh, so when you're saying ritual, you're talking Learnitor.
Learnitor, yeah. That's Mike's famous system, Learnitor Magic.
Learnitor Magic.
I forgot that is a wonderful name.
Can't believe you didn't remember Learnitor Magic.
I did as soon as you said it.
I know. I saw the recognition
of joy.
All right.
And so the idea is I treat it as it evolves as well, so they get better at doing it. Magic in say an industrial era in my world, magic looks like a factory. It's picked in a spot specifically on purpose. There are. It's cheating.
Like ley lines and stuff.
Yeah, like ley lines might come together where this factory's at, but they're actually using the factory. The people's repetitive motions inside don't necessarily have to match up with the output of what's coming out like it would in a normal factory, so they can cheat and do things faster and do things cheaper than factories of normal people. But mages end up, mages in my world, could very easily be like CEOs of major corporations. Computers are a very big place of where spells happen because the spells become scripts that are run on the computer, which is using up the energy and time of the computer instead of the caster. So that's kind of how magic flows in Gardual. But I treat it as technology and it evolves with it. And so there's dangers of that too, where, think about it, if you can now cast spells, and it's using the energy the computer's pulling into it instead of the energy of the caster, he can pull off more powerful stuff, but there's risk to when people get more power. It's kind of like, not only do we have an atom bomb, but we have a super, virus that could spread to people from a computer by some crazy mage. Oh, that's right. That's a story idea.
I was about to say, you like that idea. I can see your eyes light up on that one. While we're on this, I want to segue. I think that this part of the subject lends itself well to this.
Yeah.
So with magic versus technology, you could also, when choosing your tech level, if you want something that's a little more creative, you can decide either how the technology advances, if something might be missing. Like, for instance, what if
cats had no claws?
Yeah, I don't think they can hear that.
I know.
Maybe that. We have the Ra, our producer, is antsy. I think she's making that noise because
she wants the laser light.
Laser pointer. Anyway, missing technology, like missing pieces of the chain, links in the chain or pieces in the puzzle. We think about how technology advanced on Earth, and it all kind of makes sense. But what if we skipped something or missed something? For instance, the example I have written on the board is Fallout. In Fallout, they never created the transistor.
Yeah.
So that's why the technology, if you're familiar with
their
Fallout,
argument,
yeah, that's why Fallout looks the way it does and has the feel that it does, because they never created the transistor. I mean, what was it all? Vacuum tubes?
Yeah.
So prior to transistors, we used vacuum tubes for like everything. Like maybe, maybe you've got an area. Oh, you know what? Oh, there's a great book, and I don't remember the name of it. It's an old science fiction book, but the basic gist is, and I think I might have mentioned it on the show before. The basic gist is you have an alien race that comes to invade Earth, and they're not terribly older than Earthlings, but what they did is they put all of their technological study and scientific advancement into space exploration. So they got to the space age long before Earth did, but they didn't do anything for weapons, whereas humankind are all about making bigger and better weapons. So they landed on Earth with spaceships, and we're like, holy crap,
we're done.
But none of them had a gun. And we were well into black powder weapons. Like the story takes place, I want to say, after the musket was made. Definitely after the muskets were made. I don't know that we had gotten to cartridge firing firearms.
So maybe
at that
sort of like
point.
around Silver Era kind of muskets.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know that they quite had cartridge-based weapons yet. But the point is that while this space species had come to Earth, they were able to do that. They had nothing as far as how to conquer, and we just wiped them out. They're like, wow, you got spaceships. That's great.
Can we have those?
I have tons of guns. I have so many dudes with guns.
You followed into our trap.
Yeah. So does your tech level, or does your story or your world have a technological gap? And
here's another thought too, especially with magic, is if magic's used as a crutch, let's say, in the Stone Age, the mages of your world start figuring out how to make steel swords.
Prior to steel swords being made, or just the fact that they know how to make them so that they can produce them faster than an ironsmith.
I would say, like, in the Stone Age, they're typically making flint, spearheads, and someone's like, "Pasa!"
And they make
sword.
Steel. Yeah.
Does the technology of the world ever catch up there, or does that become a huge gap? And then what are other costs? What are things along the lines of metallurgy that aren't developed, or develop maybe a lot slower because magic has leapfrogged it and maybe holds back certain areas, or maybe, you have healers, so maybe medical advancements come slower. Or, maybe they use the magic to help speed them up. I'm not saying that just because you use the magic, it means it has to be slower, but it could affect it. It's a way to think about it.
It's a compelling argument. Like, because if you have an easier way to do something, chances are you're going to do it that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's definitely going to impact how the culture advances.
Yeah. And one of the things to keep in mind, too, cultures in a world typically do not advance technology at the same rate. And this causes huge turmoil. There's, in history, the idea of the Sea Peoples on Earth. And the Sea Peoples were a group of people who shockingly came from the seas, and they showed up around the end of the Bronze Age with iron swords. Egyptians basically were beaten up but not wiped out. Hittites disappeared forever. The existing Greek civilization, gone. They wiped out everything in the Mediterranean. And the interesting thing is there were lots of cultural changes with that too.
Who were they?
They're not exactly sure. They have a few people they think might be the Sea Peoples, but they're not exactly sure who are the ones that showed up and actually did it. But there's actually evidence that Hittites and Egyptians knew how to make iron weapons, but refused to because iron weapons were so much cheaper to make, which seems counterintuitive. You would think I would want cheaper weapons.
And they're better than, was it brass at the time?
It was bronze.
Bronze.
Yeah, bronze swords bent, especially when hit by an iron sword.
Right.
And but it was softer, so it bent more.
I would imagine an iron sword would also be a lot heavier.
Heavier, so with the brute force on top of it, yes. I mean, there's a reason why two powerful empires were kicked off the earth. But the thing was, the reason they didn't do it, it was control. Because iron weapons are cheaper, if you start allowing people to make them, because swords and spears and iron arrows might fall in the hands of people in your civilization. So
rebellion has a stronger potential.
A stronger risk. So they were actually holding back the technology. There were some evidence of iron tools that were being used in both of the areas.
Well, any controlling power, I mean, anyone out there is silly if they don't think any controlling power out there doesn't withhold technology.
Yeah.
The American military has the best technology. Well, the American military, I'm going to say up until recently, and this is an arguable point, always had the best technology. And then slowly it made its way into the consumer market. Nowadays, it seems to me that we have such a powerful driving commercial force of technological advancement that you do see some really great...
As a veteran, I'm going to tell you something right now.
Yes.
When you see film footage of battles, when you see the might of the American force on television, you are never witnessing our current generation capacities.
Right.
Whenever the military fights a war, they're fighting with their last generation technology, which is the stuff deployed to their common soldiers. They have superior equipment than we have any idea of. And I'm not saying they have like spaceships. I don't think that. But they have, it's the bombs you're seeing are the last generation bombs because they went into production.
Right.
And, it's like they have heavier, nastier stuff that they're holding back. Like we have railguns. We make railguns. We know how to make railguns. I'm not joking.
Like handheld? Like I know
handheld.
I know we've made ship ones. I know we also have made ship lasers.
Yes. But I'm talking about, to the point where by 2018, we'll probably start seeing the first ships actually with that as a standard weapon.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which makes EMPs even more scary.
What is it? EMPs?
EMPs.
EMPs. Makes EMPs even scarier?
Yeah, because, now you turn off the electricity and we can't shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But you know what? Every time a big fight starts up again, they recommission all the old battleships. The old battleships, we're talking about ships that are like 50, 60, 70 years old. They still get recommissioned because they work.
A-10 Warthogs get recommissioned every time. B-52 bombers, I don't think have been decommissioned yet. And you'll hear these stories talking about our bombers are 50. There's a reason why the B-52 is still. First off, let me be clear: the engines aren't the same.
Right, of course.
The cockpits, all of the gear on the inside is different. The fuselage is the same because if you want a strategic bomber that can drop a small city on a small city worth of bombs,
right.
That's what the B-52 is. You don't need a new fuselage design. They've developed new things that deliver bombs since then. Most of them are smaller aircraft like the F-117 fighter bomber. So, a lot of these things that we talk about there are silly, but the battleships are immense. And still, those are 18-inch guns. And they have a very long range. You would not want to be in the area where those shells landed. Wouldn't be a good day.
My point for mentioning it is that I started with a sentence, and the sentence basically ran like this. Powers that be withhold technology. There is more advanced. Do you really think in this day and age, 2016 now, that we can't have cars that go 300 miles a gallon? Of course they can, but the oil companies would never allow that to occur.
I'll put it to you this way. In this day and age, it's harder than ever to hide that.
Yeah.
Think of what Snowden did. Think of what Bradley Manning did. Those are two guys with a cell phone. I mean, the likelihood to hold back real superior technology, especially the more people who know about it, the harder it is to hold back. So I'm just the opposite. I think it's harder to hold back technology today than ever before.
I don't think it's a case of we need to keep it under wraps. I think it's a case of we have enough money to prevent it from being made.
Maybe, yeah.
I want to say it wasn't too long ago, within the last year or two, I read an article that said Volkswagen overseas produced a consumer vehicle that did 320 miles a gallon. It actually only had a 2-gallon gas tank because you'd go through so little gas. Yeah. You'd go through so little gas that you wouldn't want the gas to go bad in the gas tank if you had a big tank.
Well, yeah, but some of the problems too, though, we have the ability to make a lot of things that aren't feasible to make too. So we have the ability to make things, but the cost to produce them is so expensive.
Oh, of course.
Volkswagen has no reason to hold back selling those cars. That's the problem the oil companies have.
Well, that's the point, though. Yeah. So if the oil company goes to Volkswagen and says, okay, well, we're going to pay you X amount to or we're going to buy that technology and we own the patent now, so you can't make that car.
If Volkswagen tomorrow could produce a car that got 300 miles to the gallon, they would make so much money. Think about why would you buy any other car?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
But don't you think the oil companies would not allow that to occur?
What the hell does Volkswagen care what they think? Volkswagen's going to do what brings the most cash into Volkswagen.
Right.
They don't profit from oil. They profit from cars.
I get that. But do you honestly think oil couldn't pay for that profit instead of that car being produced? Don't you think that car...
They could not afford the profit that car would make.
You don't think?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
I think they do.
I think they could not afford that.
I'm going to have to do more research on this because I swear I read up about this car. I saw a picture of it.
They create all kinds of interesting concept cars all the time. The problem is the cost to produce them and to scale them into manufacturing.
I see what you're saying.
That's where the cost is.
Gotcha.
What I'm saying is if Volkswagen has the technology to do it, that car is coming out tomorrow.
So that
is a huge distraction.
Yeah, that actually gets us right into the impact of technology. We've actually been talking about the impact. The impact of technology.
I mean, is there anything else with the impact that you think is important for the listener right now?
Well, I mean, just whether or not choosing your tech level and how the tech level affects your culture and your story is a driving force of the story. Obviously, if you take a look at something like anything written by William Gibson, any of the Burning Chrome stuff, technology...
The car was important.
I'm sorry? The car?
In the books you were just talking about.
No. It's more about computers and stuff. Computers? Yeah. No. Now, my point is that technology was a driving force of the story. Having the tech level and what they could define in the story was very important because the story was wrapped around the technology. Yeah. Well, if you're telling a story that's more about, your characters and the development of the story between a few characters, technology doesn't necessarily have to play a big part other than the backdrop of where you choose to tell the story.
Or it can affect the actual the backdrop and why things radically change.
Well, I think it's definitely going to affect. But my point is, if I'm committed to writing a love story and it's just boy meets girl, they run into difficulty, blah, 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 blah. Tech level doesn't matter. It's the tech level I choose to put that in. It could be anything, and it's going to change how the story pans out. But it's still going to be boy meets girl, they run into difficulty and end up together.
I'm not changing that, but what I'm talking about is something different, which is the idea that you can use a radical change in technology to have a backdrop for your story to take place in. For example, the stirrup.
The stirrup?
The stirrup is the stirrup and the bit and bridle on a horse are two of the most important technological advances in human history.
Really?
Because
I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't think it would be as heavy as what you're like. When you ask me, what are the biggest technological advancements? I'd be like the aqueduct, indoor plumbing, and what do you call it? Antibiotics.
And here's why. And I'm not saying it's the biggest, but it's definitely, I think, the biggest one that people don't even think about.
I never would have thought about it.
But it's like air conditioning, I would say, is another one of the biggest ones people don't think about.
Yeah.
But here's why. Up until that time in Europe, the Roman Empire had superior infantry. And even when they had lousy emperors and they were broke, they hung around and they slapped people around. And they'd lose a little fights here and there on the borders. But in general, they were this huge established empire that was going nowhere. And then the Huns came. And the Huns had these little things to where when they were on their horses, the Huns would not fall off the horses if they hit someone with a spear. The problem is before you have those things to put your feet in, when you hit someone with a spear or a sword, you might fall out.
Yeah, you create a pivot point and leverage. And
all of a sudden now, these guys on horses have a huge advantage. And so the older countries like Rome were in huge trouble. Within 100 years, the Western Roman Empire was gone. And in the Eastern Roman Empire, the most important unit was no longer the legion. It became the Kafarak, which was horse cavalry. They survived long enough to adapt. The Western Roman Empire didn't have that opportunity. They were gone. So, but it could make the backdrop for this huge technology, which you think is nothing, but really, I mean, because when I was first told that story too, I was like, I'm like, the what? Horse gear? Come on. But it really was that important. And it changed the entire geography of Europe. And the thing is, it makes for it interesting if you want to have a realistic reason for like an epic, war happening. That could be one where this huge old empire is defeated by a little piece of metal on the bottom of someone's foot. It's not even the thing they're getting stabbed with.
Right.
But yeah, no. And you figure the entire evolution of the modern knight all came about from the ability to plant your feet into into the thing, and then they would build the bigger saddles to help hold them on. And that even led up to the modern Norman cavalry, which were your classic knights in big heavy armor that would run through buildings to hit stuff. Literally just flatten whole buildings in a charge. Oh yeah.
Like
not a stone castle, but like if you're like in a wooden house,
yeah,
a 50-man cavalry charge would just
you're talking like a small army trashing. Yes, that I get. Okay. I thought you meant like one dude running into a house on a horse and
probably not
collapsing the building. I'm like, no. That I don't see that really happening.
That'd be a pretty cheap home.
So does technology change your story? Why or why not?
And, it can, I mean, and I think it's one of those that's really up to the writer or the storyteller. It's, do you want the technology to have to change the story? I mean, maybe you make the alternative history where Rome doesn't care and they just, Attila comes in and they arrest him and game over. As the writer, when you make a fiction, the great thing is you can lie. And that's actually your job. So, however you want the story to be affected, but it's a good way. A lot of times writers will hurt themselves and say, I'm stuck here. I have no idea what to do. These externalities in your world can have effects on your story. So don't be afraid to bring in externalities from your world to affect your story, and it will change your world a little bit, but let it.
How quickly does technology change or advance in your world? Which I think we've kind of been touching on this throughout the conversation.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing here is, look at what the two key points in history that come to when I thought of that question, that come to mind was the burning of the libraries of Alexandria, the loss of the ability to make concrete, and the other one was
the steam engine.
Well,
that's my favorite.
The Dark Ages, really. Like there was like no
loss of even respect for reading and writing.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's what it was, right? It was like everybody like just we stopped writing stuff down.
The Christians were so mad at the Romans still. Centuries after they had even taken over the Roman Empire.
And we talked about this once before.
Yeah, a little bit, but essentially they kind of hated learning, and reading and writing were pagan things. And then, it probably took a few centuries for them to start to go, that was kind of dumb.
Maybe we should write some stuff down.
But you figure up until like, what they, call probably the beginning of the Middle Ages would be Charlemagne. And he started bringing back these ideas of cathedral schools where there'd be a class of people who start reading and writing again. And by the high Middle Ages, all of your nobles were reading and writing again pretty much. Except for Joe. He gets made fun of in class. Barton.
Barton? Joe Barton?
Joe Barton.
I never knew Joe Barton.
Maybe he's dumb.
I knew Carrie Barton.
She was smart.
She was smart.
Okay.
Lucky go. Look, you had a 50-50 shot.
And I went with the nice one for once.
Of course.
Because it was an actual person.
So yeah, take into consideration how technology moves in your. I mean, look, some people will pick a story or tech level, and you'll definitely see this in fantasy where, there's 18 books and it's all the same tech level. Like it never changes. So it's always swords and sorcery. It's always bows and arrows and horseback. It's like one of these days someone's going to invent an engine or steam power. It's it's all just magic and sorcery. Which, don't get me wrong, I don't want to knock it because I certainly love those.
There's a reason, once again, why it's...
Yeah, there's a reason it's popular. They're great books. But I also feel that it's completely unrealistic. And again, it's fantasy. I get that it's unrealistic. But if you want your world to follow some sort of like real world logical path, even if we're including sorcery and magic and all this other stuff that doesn't exist, you have to consider that over time, we come up with new, better ideas, new, better ways to do things.
Especially when you're doing a naturalistic world, you really have to keep in mind that, it's a great excuse to change the setting a little bit, to change some of the cultures and to really play with it. If you're writing another story and it's not part of a trilogy, it's not part of, previous stories, set it in a slightly different time period. You can kind of play with a bunch of different elements that way. Like, you can even have them thinking back on their older, the characters from your older novels, and they can have opinions that are completely wrong because history changes reality. And because of the newer tech level, those state of the art, Romans that took over, Western Europe were punks, by 500 AD, no one was a Roman anymore.
Is there anything else that you want to... I think we've covered this list pretty thoroughly.
We've covered this list. As a quick little teaser, though, I'm putting together essentially a strategy, an actual system for doing it. And we're going to reveal that next month, probably mid-next month sometime, whenever I fill in the spreadsheet. As
a resource, I would highly recommend, and I fall back on it because as a tabletop role-playing game nerd, I was a huge, and still am, even though I haven't played in ages, a huge fan of the GURPS system. And I think that their tech level system is, it's really great for story building, for giving yourself an idea of, really great basics on how to advance technology, and I don't mean like advanced technology while you can do that. I mean literally how to advance technology. So if you've got like Stone Age, Iron Age, and how to move up through things. They have like this whole leveling system that lets you know after this comes this, after this comes this, you can't have this before this, yada, yada, yada.
And if you're really stuck as wanting to get started and you don't really know anything, you have a few little visions and you want to create a world and you don't know how. If you get the GURPS Space book, it will actually cover not only how to create solar systems, but how to create planets, and you don't have to do the dice rolling stuff. Just pick what you want. But they cover technologies. They cover a lot of the basics that worlds are going to have. They won't have all of the details there, but that specific book for a world builder, I think, is tremendous.
So, Jeff, what's the world building task of the day?
World building task for the day is how would your current tech level advance to the next tech level, and how would that affect your story world? So just think about your world for a second. Think about where your technology is. And think about what is just beyond
What's the next stage?
And you can be wrong because, who cares? But just think of something that's a little bit more advanced and maybe it's 2 tech levels higher. Who cares? Just pick what would happen if that got introduced today. What would happen to the cultures? Would your states fall or would they quickly adapt because that's...
Or better yet, who would be the culture to advance it? Sometimes it comes out of odd places, just like you're talking. Well, you'd think that the Romans would have just kept storming on, but then the Huns come in with the stirrups, and boom, things change.
Do you want to know a mini secret about my world that you might not know?
Sure.
And that no one really knows?
Sure.
There is a culture in my world that is consistently 2 tech levels above everyone else.
2?
2 tech levels above everyone else.
In GURPS terminology?
In GURPS terminology.
And tech level in GURPS terminology goes up to like what? It's like 0 to like 14, 15, something like that? Or does it go?
I'm sorry, it was
actually,
1.
no, doesn't it go all the way up to 22? I seem to remember it because I want to say that like the super ridiculous space age is in the low 20s.
And they don't make it quite that far, but essentially there's a culture that has, essentially when people are on horse with arrows, they have rifles.
Wow.
They have trains.
Wow.
They're very xenophobic.
So they're the technocracy.
So you got to find out.
It's not the technocracy.
It's not the technocracy.
Okay.
But I mean, they kind of worship technology in sort of the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But not really. They don't think it's magic, but technology is their thing.
Cool. Real world?
Real world task of the day. Build a cotton gin.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
That's it.
Well, take your time. Build a cotton gin. We might want to go with something that's a little less time consuming, though.
Yeah. Okay. So
maybe something that's not quite as labor intensive.
Well, I am lazy. I wouldn't want to do it.
You got any other ideas?
Ra couldn't eat it, so she wouldn't push me to do it. How about we just watch like a science documentary on like one of those like History Channel ones on like ancient engineering, not alien ones or something, but actual like
I got to tell you, when you were
cultural achievement ones, or they have neat ones about like factories.
I love what you were just talking about earlier is the military documentaries that talk about how weaponry advances throughout different wars. I find them to be riveting.
Yeah.
Riveting.
I'm a huge fan of things that tell me about how cultures live, especially ancient cultures. And, or modern cultures today, like the Mayans today, and then you think of the Mayans back then, and they're still around. Incans are still out there.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Not the way that we know. Well, are you referring to like, because I know we still there are cultures on the planet that are untouched by time.
No, these are touched by time.
Okay.
Totally. I mean, the Mayans are largely under the auspice of the Mexican government at this point.
Okay. So you're just talking about a people at that point.
Yeah, but how's the changes in the world affected them? Or it's interesting also, I like to look at cultures that are the opposite where, and there are very few of these left anymore, but, it's like, how do these people still live?
There is an island. I'm trying to remember where it is.
In Indonesia somewhere.
Is that it? Yeah, that sounds familiar.
There's a lot of islands in Indonesia with extremely remote places. It's one of the few places in the world where you still have a lot.
There is an island out there where it's still like super low tech level, tribal, whatever, and people have accidentally and intentionally landed on this island only to be immediately killed and eaten on the beach.
Yeah, that would be possible.
Like this, and now it's like nobody goes there. It's like obviously the tech level that we have now, we could storm the beach with a bunch of guns, but everyone's like, well, it's not really fair. These people have been on this island for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Yeah. Just generation after generation. They're not hurting anyone as long as you don't land on their beach. If you land on the beach, then yes, they're going to hurt you.
A sky cloud sign, don't land here.
Yeah, don't land here. Or like the what was the tribe that was only a couple of years ago? It was like a 2 ago that was found in South America.
Yeah, the Amazon is another one of those areas where they find these remote tribes again. Those are the two main areas. Is like Indonesia island. It must be in Indonesia.
Yeah.
Because Indonesia too, even on some of the bigger islands, it's really hard to get to certain spots. Same thing as the Amazon, and that's the reason why those are probably the two most likely areas on Earth where you'll find something very much less touched by modern man. Okay, and so the tease for next episode is fear.
Jeff's laughing because of what else I wrote on the tease, but we'll skip that. We'll save that for another episode.
We'll save that for now.
Thanks for listening.
And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. It'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.